pretty costly. I'm asking for your help. Your donation can make it possible for these students to live their passion and promote the vintage automobile industry. Please visit our site at give.alfredstate.edu and search Great Race to learn more and help us reach our goal. Thank you. Please visit our site at give.alfredstate.edu to learn more and help us reach our goal. Thank you. Right now.
Do you feel like I do right now?
Motivated.
Rocksteady.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I can do it.
I can do it.
You can do it.
You can do it.
Very special guest on today, and his name is Michael Dover, and Michael was a 2016 inductee into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And Michael, welcome to America's Web Radio.
Well, thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here, as well as an honor.
Well, an honor probably not, and I've got to fess up. I made an idiot out of myself last night, which most folks that know me figure, well, what else is new? But again, publicly, I wanted to apologize to Mike for a less than warm reception last night when I was at home. And sometimes I can do it and sometimes I can't, Mike, is that sometimes I can turn the station off when I go home and forget about everything, or other times it goes with me, and last night was one of the times I'd turned it off totally and the bells just didn't go off, and once again I apologize, and you're quite the gentleman.
Well, I appreciate that, David, and I'll tell you that it's hard in today's military when we have young men and women deployed overseas, and 1 minute we want them to engage the enemy, and the next minute we want them to hand out water. And so it's a difficult thing when you've been trained that to come back to the United States and try to live a normal life, and that on and off switch sometimes gets broken. So no apology necessary. I totally understand and get it. I'm a veteran myself, and it's good to be amongst comrades.
Well, thank you. And as I mentioned last night, I always make it very clear on the air that I am a veteran, or I've been told I am, so I'll take it for that. But I did not serve in Vietnam. I was in the military in the reserves during Vietnam, but I did not serve. So my hat's off, or my helmet is off for all you guys that did, and I'm very fortunate and that my son is in the Air Force serving in Germany. So he took up the slack, I guess, and where father let it down, he took it up. So anyway, very proud of him, and and we talked about it, I think, a little bit last night, Mike, but things have changed so much, and it certainly wasn't like being able to give Robert a hug yesterday, but at least the idea of being able to see him, and with Messenger and all that stuff, and I think many times about my father, who was in the Navy during World War II, and I don't, it must have been a killer having to write letters, and 2 weeks later you'd get the letter, or 3 weeks or whatever, and correspondence was slow and at best, and just things have changed.
And for the better, I might add. Families can sit here in the United States and then, in the snap of a finger, have a teleconference with their loved one in Afghanistan or Iraq or Egypt or some other outpost in this world where we send our men and women. And it's so absolutely cool. Personally, I wish it had existed during my time. I'm considered a Cold War veteran. And again, cell phones weren't invented until late in the 1980s, if my history serves me correct, and sometimes my history can be very wrong. But it is an incredible thing to be able to talk to your loved ones overseas right now in real time And sure does beat letter writing, because if you know anything about me, I hate writing. And yet it's the very thing I do now.
Well, sometimes, what is it, our transgressions catch up with us or something?
Very true, I think. Very true.
But it's, that has been good. And I guess one of the things that has upset me over the past few years was, and I certainly had nothing to do with it other than watching it on TV, but was NASA and the knowledge that we gained from space is working for us today, and to have cut that program out and all the opportunities to discover new things, I thought was a crime unto itself. But we get along and we have to go from there. So I didn't do a real good job of introducing you. You are the National Chaplain for the Disabled American Veterans. Is that the right title?
That is correct. I've been that now for 6 years.
Wow.
And that's a story in itself. Because it was something, I was not looking for that position. If I may just digress a little bit.
Sure.
and tell you a little story how I got that position. I'm sitting at home minding my own business. Of course, I've been in ministry 35 years. And quite content at home when I get a phone call from the national headquarters of the Disabled American Veterans. And a gentleman on the other end says, hey, Dover, you're doing a great job as state commander for our organization, and, we'd like you to consider coming up on the national stage and be our chaplain because we understand your credential. And I kindly informed that gentleman that, nope, not interested, but I appreciate his consideration. Now, there was this very uncomfortable pause on the other end, and next thing you know, I hear is, Dover, you're not listening to me. From that moment forward, I started listening to him, and the rest is history.
And what was on his shoulders, or were we outranked or just outpositioned?
He was a high-ranking staff position within the organization. Matter of fact, I would call him the CEO if I had to. And basically, he was a very kind gentleman. He's since retired. And he saw some things in me that a lot of people have seen, because Dover doesn't go out and start volunteering for things. I just see things that other people are doing, and I say, I want to be part of that because it does good things for our veterans. And so, therefore, that's how I get involved. And the next thing you know, I get awarded for this, or I get recognized for that. And it's not about recognition or awards. It's about doing the right thing for our veterans.
So true. And we went through, and I'm, again, mentioned this probably more times than I should, but I'm extremely proud of the citizens today, and a lot of it's because of the veterans that have said, you ain't going to treat them like you treated us. And,
right.
The Vietnam veterans and post-Vietnam veterans are out making sure that when our troops come back from the Mideast or wherever they might be, that they are well treated going through airports, well treated by the USO, well treated
right.
by everybody. And and we say this often, and I don't know, I don't think it's overused by any means, but people have to understand that our freedom is not free. And the people that make sacrifices, and I'm sure, I can't imagine what you see on a day in and day out basis. And everybody thinks, well, disabled veteran means that they've lost a limb or something. Well, disabled veterans can be a lot of things, from losing a limb to terrible PTSD or up and down the gambit. And I'm sure you have some situations or know of situations that are almost indescribable.
Well, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head when you made that statement that when you assign the word disabled to somebody, people are thinking for a physical, actual defect. And that is not the case. PTSD can't be seen unless someone acts it out. TBI, traumatic brain injury, causes a jolt in the brain, bruises it, and then you're not able to speak properly, but you still may have all your arms, your legs. You can breathe, you can eat on your own, but there is a disruption in your normal lifestyle that you're used to prior to that event happening. And it's interesting because, my dad is 78. He doesn't look a day over 55. I'm 57, and I don't look a day over 13. And bottom line is I had to grow this goatee that I have because I'm currently a school bus driver, and it was so that they wouldn't confuse me with one of the kids. So bottom line is that people don't know that I'm a disabled veteran. In the school system that I work for now, I'm retired Army. I retired from Northrop Grumman. And bottom line is every November Veterans Day, I'd wear my dress blues to drive as a bus driver. I wanted the kids to know there are veterans out there defending this country, our Constitution, our way of life, and I wanted them to be aware of that. And I remember one particular story. I'm driving the school bus north to the school system when this young high schooler, well, Mr. Mike, and that's what they all called me on the school bus, he says, "Do you have PTSD?" And he yells it out in front of the whole bus. Now, I'm not been diagnosed with PTSD, mind you. So I thought I'd have a little fun with this. And after a little uncomfortable pause on his part, I said, well, I think I do, but I didn't take my medications this morning, so I don't know how this ride is going to end. And it was the most quietest bus I have ever enjoyed in my entire life. And I took advantage of that and just smiled real big as the bus just remained quiet as I had to drive another 15 miles to get to the school campus. No one said anything. And, of course, you're smiling at all these students as they're getting off the bus at their particular campus. And eventually they all warmed back up to me. They thought it was a unique statement to make, but I just had a little fun with that. But the thing is that PTSD is real. TBI is real. Loss of limbs is real, and I know many in the disabled American veterans community that have a variant of all of those plus. And, it's interesting when you're a disabled American veteran and you're in this organization, nobody talks about their disabilities because, well, everyone has one. So, there's no need to discuss it and try to up one on a bigger or badder disability. We all have an understanding amongst the veteran community, hey, you served, you're less than the 1% of the American population that chose to put on the uniform. Here you are, and you're the hero. And it doesn't matter if you've seen combat or did not see combat. I can tell you in the 21 years as an infantryman in the active Army, I never saw a day of combat. But that doesn't lessen my service any because I'm still less than the 1% of those Americans who volunteered, whether they were drafted in Vietnam or volunteer. You could have drafted and been a draft dodger in Vietnam during that era, but you chose not to. I volunteered from high school out of a born necessity to get out of work. And to let your audience know what I'm talking about, I was raised on a dairy farm. And a dairy farm was hard. You'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning milking cows and doing all those chores. You'd get off the bus at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, change your clothes, go out and do chores, and still doing homework at 9:30. And I wanted to get out of that lifestyle, so I joined the Army because all they required of me was push-ups. So, bottom line is
maybe a little bit
that,
more than that.
Well, I know this. The Army changed my life. It matured me. I was a very immature individual. Did some really stupid things as a private. And I can tell you that the Army matured me in many ways, and I'm grateful for my service. If it didn't benefit the country as a whole, it benefited who I am today.
Well, this is something that, like I said, I'm very proud of my younger son that's in the Air Force and stationed in Germany. But I feel like I support Israel's policy of everybody has to serve. And, in fact, I would say, well, certainly everybody that's come in here from the Hall of Fame are just wonderful folks. And I think the service is good. I know from my standpoint, my basic training and AIT, I learned how to take care of my clothes. And I thought there was some kind of magician. I think it was called a maid that had always taken care of my clothes. But I'd leave them all over the place and come home and they were hung up. So
until I was 27 years old.
yeah.
So I had to do all that myself. And, of course, when I got married, my wife wanted to take care of those things for me. We've been married almost 30 years now. Wonderful woman. I remember a time when I was in Korea, and you could put your uniform.
I'm sorry. I lost you.
Through and pick all that stuff up, and at the end of the day, they'd have your spit shine, your fatigues pressed, hanging on the doorknob when you came in out from your training, and it was wonderful. And I got kind of spoiled then. So when I came back to the States, I was using, instead of ironing my own clothes like I had to up to that point, I started using dry cleaners a lot more. So I got spoiled in Korea.
I can imagine. Well, but it's tell me more about what you do as the national chaplain for the DAV.
Sure. Basically, I'm the chaplain over every faith that is part of the organization. So we have Muslims, we have the Israelites, the Jews as part. We have Christians, we have non-Christians, we have atheists, we have agnostics. You're basically the spiritual leader over all of that. And the Constitution bylaws of our organization says that we are non-sectarian, so that there's no discriminatory movements made within the order. If you served your country honorably and you're a disabled vet at 0% or at 100%, you can be a member of the Disabled American Veterans. So a big thing that I've had to deal with as a national chaplain seemed to be minute, but in our rituals, we were a majority of Christian, how should I say this? We were a Christian nation many years ago. Here in the last, 10 years, maybe, not sure, we've started changing and in our culture as Americans, and I think we've lost our identity to a good point, and we've forgotten our God to a certain extent. But from that perspective, see, I'm a believer in Christ. That's my faith perspective. But I'm the chaplain over all these other faiths that disagree with me. Well, my job is to simply have a common thread woven through all these different religions that make up our organization, because it's not about, from the Disabled American Veterans position, it's not about whose faith is better or whose faith is right. It's about the good things we do for veterans regardless what their faith is. So that's what I have to deal with when I write my articles bi-monthly, when I'm talking to individuals. As a matter of fact, my last article that I just wrote was addressing the chaplains as a whole. It came about in a national convention that we had in Orlando when I had a female chaplain approach me, and she says, and I suppose she meant it as a slam, but she came up to me and says, we need to make the national chaplain position better. And I had a few other gentlemen around me, and I knew from experience that she did not know what's required or what needed to be done to be a national chaplain. And therefore, I gave her my advice. She says, well, that's just a matter of semantics, and she turned around and walked away. But because of that conversation, it created an article. And basically in that article it says, look, guys, no one is concerned about your theological prowess. No one cares how smart you are about the Bible, the Quran, or whatever, the Vishnu, or any other documents that are out there that drive your faith. What they care about is whether or not you care. And so I have found that if you just simply care for others, you will open a door for you to be able to share your faith. And I've learned something else from my faith perspective, that when I'm sharing my faith, I don't have to convince anybody that I'm correct. My faith just requires me to tell the truth. Once the truth is told, you do with it whatever you wish, but I've been obedient to my faith and told you what you need to do. And so I've gotten a lot of peace from that perspective, because I didn't have to shake people by the shoulders or grab their hand or, beat them over the head with a Bible and say, you gotta. I've learned a lot that if you're just kind and you care for people, you open doors. And people will come and they will reveal the craziest things to you. But as a chaplain, as I have told the organization, when you elect or appoint someone as a chaplain, and by the way, you don't have to be seminary trained in the DAV to be a chaplain, which is an unfortunate thing. However, it's not required. And based on the premise that I just wrote, all you have to do is care, but you have to care from a mature position. You can't think it's a platform to have church. And therefore, I find myself quite often going around the United States at various department conventions, reminding members, hey, look, if you're kind and you care, you'll get a lot more accomplished than if you simply come in like a bull in a china shop and start shaking people's foundations. And I have found that has worked every single time.
There used to be a term for it, and I was trying to think of a good way to apply it. But as you were talking and explaining that you're the chaplain for a multitude of different beliefs, you must be a heck of a dancer.
Dancing around the issues? Actually,
not dancing around the issues, just being able to make everybody happy and dance to their tune, you know?
David, it's not about making anybody happy. My mission is not to make you happy. My mission is to ensure that you're helping veterans in the best way you possibly can. So, believe it or not, as the national chaplain for the last 6 years, I have found that people will openly discuss what they believe in my presence and ask for advice. And that's when the doors open for me to share my faith. And so it's really not about dancing around the topics and making sure that we don't press that hot button that would set people off. We're already, when you say disabled American veterans, you already know that there's a group of PTSD folks in there and TBI and a few others. And, it doesn't take much to set anybody off, but I just come in and I just love them unconditionally and show them that I care by having a conversation with them. And usually at these huge meetings I go to, I'll find that veteran sitting off in the corner by themselves. That's not with a group or a couple. And I'll go sit down with them, and that's where I go. And next thing you know, because I'm the national chaplain, just the title alone will bring people to you. Next thing you know, this couple or this veteran is now involved with that group because I wanted to make sure that we included all veterans regardless.
That's fantastic.
And so you're right. It's a tough thing. Writing. I guess writing is where I'm careful, but I can assure you when I write my articles for the magazine, you can find all kinds of scripture throughout that obstacle. I just don't tell you where the street address is, and I don't come out and I paraphrase. But the spiritual principle is always in my articles.
Let me. We're going to have to stop. I was loving listening, and I just ran right through one of our breaks. But we'll take a break, and we'll be back with Sergeant Micheal Dover right after this.
We meet in Newtown Park, and part of one of our projects is the installation of the Healing Wall, the half-scale model of the Vietnam Wall that traveled the United States. Well, it's coming to rest, and it's going to live in Johns Creek forever, the half-scale model. We're looking at possibly a March implementation ribbon-cutting ceremony, and we're looking for donors and sponsors that want to help us in this great project. You can donate at jcvets.org.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And we do appreciate you listening to America's Web Radio. And we've got Mike Dover. He is the National Chaplain for the Disabled Veterans Association. Mike, how many veterans are involved with the DAV? We
have about 1.2 million members right now. We've we've declined over the years because our World War II veterans are becoming of age where they're now passing away, and our Vietnam veterans, I would tell you, 60% of our memberships are Vietnam veterans or Vietnam-era veterans, and they really make up the organization as we know today. And the reason why there's a disparity between veterans of yesterday and the veterans today are all about social media, something older veterans did not have. We believed in face-to-face contact. And veterans today, when we alluded to communications at the beginning of your show about being able to see our loved ones in the split moment, well, that's what this current new generation of veterans are used to. And so they're into social media and Facebook and Messenger and Twitter and things that I don't care for. But if you want to reach out to a younger veteran, that's where you have to go. And so the membership numbers have fallen a little bit. We were at 1.4 at one time, then 1.3, but we're just under 1.2 million now. But we've made an incredible effort to reach out through our communications department. Dan Clare is the director there, and he's just done a marvelous job with free PSAs and things of that nature about getting to these new generation of vets that are having issues, and sometimes the old skills that these old veterans have are what's needed right now to get them through the process at the Veterans Affairs.
Well, I hope you'll tell the gentleman that you mentioned to send us some PSAs. In fact, that brings up a question I was going to ask. How do you all get that much publicity from the national media that is supportive of what you all are doing?
I will tell you that from a national perspective, when I say national, I'm talking about ABC, CBS, NBC. We do not get much recognition on those programs. But if you have cable and you have folk TV or all those old-timey channels, we are saturated on that, all over that. Plus, every state is required by federal law, I believe, to provide free public service announcement for organizations. I don't know if it's specific for veterans or not. I think it's just free PSAs as public service announcements within their community. And we have tapped into that unbelievably. It is just amazing driving down Interstate 75 or up I-95 or 85 in my area where I live in the state of Georgia. You'll see billboards advertising the disabled American veterans and our mission. It's just absolutely amazing how we're able to reach outside the three major news networks and then in turn still be able to saturate the audience with our PSAs. It's just amazing.
That's good. And we have, I don't want to say dedicated, but we're an advocacy web station that a lot of folks don't even know what I'm talking about, but we dedicate most of our time, if not all of our time, to areas that we feel are needed. We do an elderly abuse show, we do a Venezuelan show, because we feel that it's needed because other people aren't addressing it. And I want to mention too that this is the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame show, and Colonel Rick White has just done an incredible job of lining up guests to be on, like our guest today, Micheal Dover, and we appreciate it. And I don't think, in reality, Mike, that too much can be done. As a country, we owe everything to our military and to our ministry, and it's good that we have a president that appreciates our military. And by the way, I want to mention one quick thing too about our president and our first lady. I've been doing this thing now for about 2 weeks, I guess, not quite 2 weeks, but I hope anybody listening will take the time to send our first lady a thank you note for all she does for our country and bringing dignity and elegance and class back to our White House. And she's done a fantastic job and has gone through criticism for no reason. So just take the time. Christmas is come and gone, so it's not Christmas card, it's just a thank you note, thanking our First Lady, Melania Trump, for doing a super job, which I was also very impressed with our president calling the troops during Christmas, yesterday as a matter of fact. And he has recognized how valuable our military is. And my if I had a helmet, I'd tip my helmet to him.
Well, that is a great idea, and I'm in total agreement with that. Even leaderships or folks in leadership positions, sometimes hearing from the public gives them that shot of encouragement that puts that extra lift in their step, and it's needed. Everybody needs encouragement, and I'm telling you, the fire that this current administration has been under, any words of encouragement sent to them, I think, is a great idea.
Well, thank you, and I hope people will take it from a chaplain. If they won't take it from an old radio guy, maybe they'll take it from the chaplain and get out there, get that pen and paper, and send her a thank you note. And
absolutely,
it just she's a nice lady. We had I have an acquaintance, not a close friend, but an acquaintance that went up and worked on decorating the Christmas tree, and said the Trumps were just incredibly nice. It was just like being with friends. And they worked, and Melania worked on the tree, and and she'd say, "Can I get you anything to drink?" Or you need anything, or you need a sandwich, or you need anything, and that it was like being in a friend's home. And I think that just tells the story. And so that's why we started the thing of sending our First Lady a thank you note. So with that, let's get back to Mike and what he's doing. Let me ask this, and this is one that we didn't discuss last night. What, as a person listening to this, whether I'm a veteran or not a veteran, what can I do? What can we do? What can citizens do to help you, Mike?
First of all, if you are a veteran, do not go to the Veterans Affairs alone. You're going to need help to navigate through that huge maze of bureaucracy if you're applying for benefits, or if you are a dependent of a veteran and you are your veteran has passed away from a disability that was diagnosed many years ago. Don't go to the VA on your own. I suggest you, and this is a plug for all veteran service organizations. I just know that the Disabled American Veterans do all the services for veterans and their dependents for free, as I think all veteran service organizations do. But we're trained specifically in the CFR 38 Code of Federal Regulation law that deals with disabilities for veterans. We know how to read it. We know how to look at your medical records from the military. We know how to look at current medical records if you are consistently receiving care on disabilities in the past. And the best way to help me is come see your local DAV, Disabled American Veterans chapter. We have service officers that are properly trained to walk you through free of charge, so you don't have to have that headache. And do I have time to share a story?
Sure.
My next door neighbor, retired staff sergeant, and basically he's broke. When I say broke, I'm talking about he has given his all to Uncle Sam, and his body is just broke. And he was so frustrated. So 3 months, I've known him for a number of years because he's been my next door neighbor, and he just comes to me, and he knew I was the national chaplain, and he's complaining about he can't get this and he can't get that, and they're stonewalling here. And I said, well, that's because you're not approaching it appropriately. He says, what do you mean? I said, sit down with me, give me some time, and I'll explain to you what it is that you need to do. Because here's the deal. You may be hurting, and let's say you have a short threshold of pain. So you go to the VA and you see a VA doctor, and he's doing a physical on you to determine your disability. And the next thing you know, you can touch your toes before you feel pain. Well, that's not what the CFR 38 law describes. The CFR 38 says it's range of mobility, not pain. So a lot of veterans confuse themselves between pain and range of mobility. Well, this young man, my next door neighbor, had some similar issues. I said, here's what you're going to do. Now, I didn't tell him to cheat. I just told him, be honest. Be honest with your body. Be honest with the doctor. And do what you can, and don't do what you can't do. Let him know what it is that you can't do. A lot of these kids, I call them, because I'm much older than they are now coming in, they go in and they act like there's nothing wrong, and if the doctor doesn't know, the doctor's not going to write it down, and next thing you know, you've been denied. And so there goes your proof from your military service of anything that happened while you were wearing the uniform. So this young man, he's so frustrated. It took me 3 months. I says, go to sick call. Now, I'm a retired infantry first sergeant, so just to give you an idea, I thought sick call AWOL, you don't go on sick call, you suck it up and you drive on. I do regret that mentality of mine because it's hurt me in my own disabilities that were not recorded, so therefore I can't use them for more disabilities at this time. But this young man came to me and I told him everything he needed to do, go on sick call and go on sick call on a regular basis. Just because you have one incident in your military record doesn't mean it's a disability. And that's where a lot of veterans are confused. But if it's a showing pattern in your military medical records that you continually have an issue, rest assured it can be a disability when they get out. So I took to this man and I took his medical records and I laid everything out he should be paying for with the current records he had right now. He was like 125% disabled. Wow. Now, the VA is only going to pay you a max of 100%. And I take a side note here. There are veterans out there that are 100% and they want more, and so they submit their records to increase their benefits, which the VA is not going to do. But every time you submit for benefits to the VA, they get to open your records again and take a look at your history. And I know 3 individuals right now that were 100% have been knocked down to either 0, 20, or 60% because they weren't going to the VA for their disabilities. They weren't ordering the prescription drugs that they needed. They weren't going to see the doctor on a regular basis. So the VA said, hey, they must be healed. And it reduced them. And once you get reduced by the VA, which is the United States government, you can never get that back. And if you do get it back, it will take you years to build up your case again to show that you still have those issues at the intensity in which you have them prior to them reducing your benefits. So that's just a warning to the veterans out there. Don't go that route. Don't, if you are at 100%, don't open up your records to the VA. Just don't do it. Now, going back to this young man, so I had 10, 12, 13 items that I knew based on his medical records that he was going to get disability for. And I said, now you go see the doctor for all 13 of these, and you had them multiple times in your medical records, at which time he did exactly what I told him to do. 3 days before his retirement, he was so happy. He came over and he shared with me, he says, I got 100%. And I said, you did exactly what I asked you to do. Most veterans, when they go alone, don't know what it is you have to do. And then either by experience, through trial and error, they figure it out, or just come to your local Disabled American Veterans chapter. We'll help you. And I always give my number out to any veteran that wants my help in the national organization. I said, look, if you're having problems at your local level, call me. I know the big guns, and I know all the national service officers that work. We have 268 national service officers that work in the various cities throughout the United States, and these guys are trained for 16 months so well that they're paralegals and can represent the veteran in front of the federal judge when they go do their appeals. These guys are that smart. And those guys can see things that sometimes I can't see. And so for your listeners out there that's a veteran, don't go it alone. If you want to help me, then help me help you by just coming to see a DAV rep. We'll assist you in your claim free of charge, and therefore we'll take care of you. And if there's something there that you can gain, such as more benefits, we're happy for you. But sometimes you can bring us records and there's nothing in them and there's nothing we can do for you. So, David, I appreciate the free plug for Disabled American Veterans.
Oh, no, I mean, that's exactly what we wanted, and we want more of it, you know.
Oh, I've got more.
And part of the reason that I ask is that I have learned a lesson, not me, well, my brother-in-law is learning a lesson, and the VA is very date sensitive, I guess you'd say. My brother-in-law served in the Navy and was in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and his ship was part of the blockade, and yet that was not considered a war, and I'm glad it wasn't a war. But he retired from the Navy or got his honorable discharge one day before they declared Vietnam a war. And
wow.
So he's not really, he can't say he served during wartime, but the way I understood it, and my younger sister's helping my older sister and my brother-in-law, and now we've got an attorney involved. You probably know him, Swain.
I don't think I do.
He works with veterans all the time on just cases like this where they've denied my brother-in-law anything, but the way I understood it when I was in, if you serve 180 consecutive days, then you've served and you're eligible for veteran benefits. And
absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you said that. A lot of veterans out there believe that because they didn't fight in combat or wasn't a wartime vet, that they can't receive Veteran Affairs help. The only reason you will not receive Veteran Affairs assistance is when you make, I think the law is $35,000 or more per year. If you make $35,000 more per year, it doesn't matter what era of veteran you are. The VA has some stipulations to that. But if you served, whether it was peacetime or wartime, and you have injuries, whether peacetime or wartime, you are authorized by federal law Veteran Affairs assistance and help and health care. And a lot of veterans don't seem to understand that. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's a point that needs to be made to your audience.
Mike, if you can put up with me, I think we probably should do another show or two down the road. What do you think?
I would love to. I know we're pressed for time, but I would love to. There's so much information that I have that can assist veterans in their help. So I'm really enjoying this. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, this is my small way because I have the station and we go out. We literally go around the world. So we're talking, who knows who we're talking to at the moment that may or may not be a veteran or will be getting out soon and become a veteran. And
right.
So, I'm serious about wanting to do more than one show. And if we'll talk after the show or in the next few days too, that if it's like every other show that we do, and I certainly have a big place in my heart for veterans particularly, but every show that we do, it's all comes down to education and information. And a lot of times you don't know where to start, but
right.
It's available. The information is there somewhere, and we've got more technology and more muscle power than we've ever had in history, and it's all a matter of being told where to go on the computer or what you need to do here or do there, and
right.
That's the game we try to play, and that's what we want to do here at America's Web Radio. And want to put a plug in again for how you and I have met, and that was through a gentleman named Rick White, who is the CEO of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, which is downtown, and it's, everybody should go through it at least once. And if you're coming to Georgia, no matter what state you're from, take the time to go to that. And then we also have been publicizing the fact that the Healing Wall is coming to the town where I live, which is Johns Creek, and will be dedicated, I think it's March the 28th. And that's the wall, the Vietnam Veterans Wall. It's the 50% size that has traveled all over the United States and given people that couldn't get to Washington a chance to see the Vietnam Veterans Wall. And it's got a permanent home now in Johns Creek, Georgia. And Mike Micheal and the Vietnam Veterans Association in Johns Creek have done just an incredible job. So write it down on your calendar, folks, that March the 28th, it'll be open in Newtown Park in Johns Creek, and please come by. It's the story that Roger Wise tells, and Roger has been a big supporter of it and has done many, many things for veterans across the state. But he was at the Washington Veterans Wall, Vietnam Veterans Wall, and he saw a lady, and there was a gentleman with her, and the gentleman had traced the name of somebody and looked up and said, "I met my father today."
Wow.
And
wow.
That will get you, you know.
Yeah.
So
wow.
we owe our veterans, and like I said earlier, freedom is not free. And if we go somewhere as a nation in uniform, it's to serve the country. And Chaplain, in my feeling, you know, and I can't paint a brush and say it covers everybody, but we also go to serve God because we are a godly country.
That's right. To add to your recognition of veterans, I would just say on behalf of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, it is only one of 11 Hall of Fames in the United States. We have 50 states, and only 11 of those states have Hall of Fames for their veterans. And even though I'm not particularly a special veteran of any kind, and it was just by a fluke of luck that I ended up being inducted through friends and family who saw what I did, there are so many other veterans out there that are doing great things in the community that we don't even know. And if your listeners would mind, go to the website, go to Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, look at how you can nominate them for the great stuff that they're doing. We need to recognize these folks, and who better to hire to work in your community than a veteran that cares, a veteran that already knows what self-sacrifice is all about, a veteran that will go the extra mile when most people won't because they've been trained to go the extra mile. And so, you know, folks that I see that are put into these Hall of Fames or living locally, they're doing incredible jobs, and we just don't know it. Why not recognize them as a memorial to your families and all those descendants to come after, so they can know who Grandpa or great-grandpa was and what he did and what made him so special. And I think if you want to recognize a veteran, that is the best way to do it, is just nominate them and recognize them for just something that they probably think it's an everyday activity.
Wow. You said it so well. I can't top that in any, nor would I try to top it. We have to take care of our veterans, and I always make a note that, and I've done it for years, that whenever I'm traveling, because of the way I was treated when I came out of basic during the Vietnam era, but you know, we couldn't even wear our uniforms through an airport. And I make it a point that if I'm at an airport, whether it's Atlanta Hartsfield Airport or one someplace else, if I see a veteran with a cap on saying that he's a veteran or he served on the USS whatever, or if I see a current military person, one that's on active duty now that's traveling through the airport, I buy them a meal. And it makes me feel a whole lot better than it makes them feel. They can well afford, our troops are paid pretty well now. And, I know that they can afford to buy their own lunch or dinner or drink or whatever it happens to be. But if you want to, it's, well, you know it better than I do, Mike. I'm more blessed to give than to receive. And it just makes you feel good that you've done something for your country obscurely, but you've done it because you bought a military or veteran a meal, and it makes you feel good, makes you feel real good, in fact. So whenever you're traveling, try it out sometime. You'll love it.
And David, I would say in the final minutes here that you're practicing what you preached. Earlier you said send letters of encouragement to our First Lady. And what better way to send encouragement to our veterans than to buy them a meal? It takes a veteran to know a veteran, because a veteran to veteran understand what the sacrifices are. But if you're a family of a veteran, or you don't even know a veteran, but you want to do something nice, take David's advice. If you see one on the street, buy them a meal. They're going to be a little embarrassed at first because they think that what they're doing is just everyday stuff, but it will be appreciated in the long run. And I think, David, that's well said.
Well, I want to go one step further with it, Mike, and that's our first responders too.
Absolutely.
They are our touchable, day in and day out heroes, because they're there when we call them, be it the firefighter, the police, the EMT, whatever it happens to be. And I guess I'm just nuts, but there's one particular place here in Sandy Springs that I'll go to lunch many times, and it's not a donut shop. It's a regular place to eat, and I'll see some police friends there, and I just like to feel good, and it makes me feel good to buy a cop or a EMT a lunch.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It's these guys, and we don't appreciate it, that they put their lives in harm's way for us. And many years ago, I was an EMT, and it's I think I've never enjoyed anything more in my life than when you'd look at somebody and they'd look up at you, and they knew I didn't know that I wasn't a doctor, and wasn't trying to be a doctor, but you could see in their eyes, just get me to the hospital, please. And that again, that was like buying somebody sick a meal. It just felt good to get them there where they could get the proper care that they needed. And
that's right.
These guys that rush into a fire, our first responders at 9/11. We just got, as a country, we've got so many things to be thankful for. We live in the best place in the world, and it's not the taxes we pay, it's the stuff we do to say thank you. And just going up to a service person, thank you for your service.
That's right.
Means a lot.
Yeah. And I would say that first responders stateside probably have a tougher job than veterans. At least veterans, we know what the enemy looks like and what we're up against. But a policeman, a sheriff, EMS, every situation they're called to, they don't know what to expect. And I think that's a little bit more harder and a little bit more stressful to a certain extent. Both professions, whether it's military or first responder, have their own stressors. But sometimes I think that when you show up at a situation, you don't know if you're dealing with a drunk person, a sober person, or a crazy person. That kind of makes the stress level go up. And so kudos to our first responders. I agree. If you see them out there, absolutely.
And they
Let
won't
them know
even,
you care.
They won't even arrest you if you give them a dozen donuts.
That's right.
We want to keep that fat hanging over the belt,
That's That's right. That's right.
No, they're great folks, and just the thought of, am I going to see my husband when he come? Is he going to make it home? And it's not just the first responder men; it's the first responder women as well. That and the families, they live through trauma just like the soldier's wife does. And we made a big point many years ago when our president had to start calling up reservists to go fight because we just didn't have enough active duty soldiers. And
right.
The person that has made a career out of it or is on active duty for 6 years or whatever, their families are, I don't want to say trained, but they're used to that Joe may have to go to war, or Joe may be called up, and so they learn to take care of themselves. But when they started calling up reservists, the wives were left hanging, what do I do now? I've been depending on Joe all this time, and he changes the light bulbs and he mows the grass.
Right.
And I made a big push on the station that if you knew of somebody in your neighborhood that had been called up, offer to help the wife. It's not a big deal to go change a light bulb, or if a door is not swinging right, take care of it for him. But take care of your neighbor, and they're taking care of you whether they ever pick up a gun or not. They're still taking care of you.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So, do I qualify for preaching? Can I become a chaplain? No.
Absolutely. If you're a subject matter expert, there's no reason why you can't stand on that soapbox once in a while. As long as it's truth and people can benefit from it, I say go for it.
Well, I'd get laughed off the soapbox pretty quickly, I think. But I do love our veterans, and I'm fortunate and blessed to have not tons, but a number of friends that did serve in Vietnam. I was talking to one of them last night, as a matter of fact, and it's just, and he made it back, but he made it back covered with Agent Orange, and he's paid his dues stateside. That is just incredible. He talks now with half a tongue because he's lost most of his tongue to the Agent Orange.
Wow.
But it's it's sort of, Paul Harvey, I guess, wraps it up better than anybody in the world did. And that's called The Rest of the Story.
The rest of the story.
You know, there's a story when you enlisted and went in. There's a story while you're in, and I don't know of a veteran that doesn't have at least one story or 100 stories. And so there's that story, and then there's the story, and that's what you see, is the story afterwards. And it can be as big as the story of in the middle.
That's right. I agree.
So, I hope you'll tell that colonel, that hard-nosed colonel that we have to deal with, Mr. White, that you survived my wrath.
No issues. No worries.
And we'll even consider coming back.
I would love to. When that time comes, absolutely. You can always keep me in your back pocket.
Well, I don't think you'd fit. I'm pretty small. But anyway, if you don't mind hanging on, let me close out. And do you have time to talk for a few minutes?
Sure
okay.
I do.
Well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the plug in the jug, get out of here, and we'll be starting Healthcare Insight very shortly. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. Mike Dover, thank you so much for being on the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame show today. And
well, it's an honor for me to be here, sir. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Bye.
If your health insurance premium is more than